Welcome to Double Barrel Non-Duality. This is August of 2023, and our special guest is Mark Lackey. Hey, Mark, how are you doing today?
Doing good.
Good. I
Yeah.
dig your shirt. I dig your shirt. What is the shirt, actually?
It's the lyrics to a They Might Be Giants song.
Nice.
It's interesting. It's about a dream that he can't remember.
Very cool. Yeah. So Mark's here to just help out answering any questions. And what we often do is just kind of go back and forth. We tag team. We may both answer a question, or one of us may feel more inclined to answer a specific question than the other. But sometimes it's nice just to get different angles on things. And that's essentially how I started this project. So if you put your hand up, that's how we'll know that you want to ask a question. If you don't know how to do that, you go to reactions at the bottom of the screen. You'll see a little button and it should have a little hand up deal. And I'll just go down the list, and we usually get to everybody, but we'll do our best today. So, all right, let's start with Lubaina.
Hi again. So I was listening to a video of yours, and I know you've talked about this in your book as well, and this is just what's been coming up. In one of your recent videos, you talked about like thoughts mirroring each other, and then it's kind of like a house of mirrors, right? And I was trying to feel into that, and I'm just wondering if you can walk me through it, because I feel like I'm getting lost in the house of mirrors rather than seeing that each, like, they're all kind of reflecting each other. So
Okay, I'll start by answering that, and then Mark may have something to say, but just because it was a question about what I recently talked about. So to answer, I can answer this question in different ways. I can answer it in a sort of a technical way or like a direct experience way. But in this moment, what I feel like doing is making an analogy. And the analogy is an experiential analogy. And all of us are familiar with one of these experiences. Some of us are familiar with the second one I'm going to describe, but the contrast may reveal something. So what I was discussing in that video is that you can reasonably easily notice a thought is a reflection, meaning, okay, if I imagine a conversation I had with my mother 2 hours ago, you can see that, okay, that's not actually happening in the apparent physical world, but whatever's happening in my mind is sort of a visual re-imaging, usually, not for everyone, but it's certainly going to have some narrative component, right? So we're going to be remembering the visual and or auditory experience, or it's being reflected in the mind. And what's interesting is the mind can reflect things out of phase, meaning not in the moment, but after the fact, right? So it's not hard to relate to that. What is sometimes harder to relate to, and the deeper realization goes, the more obvious this is that not just single incidents or single conversations or a certain memory, that's not all the reflecting the mind does. The mind actually does a more sort of complex reflection where thoughts are reflecting other thoughts, such that you don't just remember a conversation with your mom in some discrete way and it just disappears out of reality. Usually it's like, there's mom, I feel like a son to that mother. I kind of have the flavor of our background and our history, and that leads to other thoughts about other conversations we had, which leads to thoughts about conversations I have with other people that relate to that, and just on and on and on and on, right? That house of mirrors of thought. That is what I would call thoughts reflecting thoughts. Okay. If you can follow that, then I'll make the analogy this way. To compare that to the experience beyond self, and specifically the experience beyond self when I'll say conditions are very calm, because even beyond self, there can be intense conditions at times. There can be like intense energetics moving through. There can be thoughts still, things like that can happen for sure. But that's, there's a background even then actually of this kind of stillness and peace. But at other times, it's just that background of stillness and peace is very much the foreground. It's this, it's not a space. It's not an aware space or substance. It's not like that, but I'm just using the terms peace and a sort of stillness. But what that's like is it has this interesting aspect, I would say, it's non-continuity. That may sound bad. It also is not, it's not bad. And experientially, it's quite lovely and freeing, but it's also not the only way the mind can imagine it. It's not that way. the way the mind imagines it is like experiences are moving by some kind of camera or a screen. Like we can't imagine timelessness with the mind because the mind needs time to think. So it actually feels like, I've heard someone say bubble like, and that's a really good description. It's just this this clarity permeating all experience, and at the same time there are these vivid, intimate experiences just sort of popping up and arising, you could say, but they're not popping up and arising for someone or to someone. That's important. And so they almost feel like discrete universes coming into being that are not related to anything in the past or future. And in that, there's actually even more intimacy, I could say. So it's discontinuity that is one of the very obvious litmus tests, maybe, or a very obvious component of not experiencing through that seeming time frame that goes on and on and on when a thought is reflecting another thought. Then you see the experience of just aliveness, not as a being necessarily, but just the experience of experiencing, the experience of aliveness itself, is non-reflective. It's complete in itself. It's non-reflective. It's non-dualistic. It's as light as a feather, but it's also very compelling, and it's very freeing, and it's very innocent. So can you pick up on that comparison? Does that help?
Yeah, especially what you just said now did something that I'm not sure what, so I'll have to stick.
Yeah. Mark may have some other things to add as well.
Okay.
The only thing I would add is just that, if there's ever a sense like you need to understand the complexity of everything, I would just like ask you to consider to let that go and just stay present and see what's coming up in the moment. And later on, I think what Angela just said, if it's not already clear, it'll just kind of clarify on its own.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you for your question. Okay, we got Susan.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, so I have just a question. I could use a little guidance on. Also, I wanted to sit here a little bit with the anxiety of I'm going to ask a question next, because I'm starting to find that I cannot resist a feeling in the moment, but in some way I feel like I want to avoid having the feeling. So not sure how to work with that. But what I've been finding recently is that in stressful situations, this comes up for me at work. I'm an obstetrician. I am outwardly calm and okay in doing my job, but I've found recently that I've been in situations where the urge to just scream and so angry, it just like burns out of me. And it's just, 50 years of training has got me not doing that. I want to be, it's an honor to be there and present with my patient, but also feel so angry sometimes. And I just want to be authentic and navigate that and not displace what's going on with me to who I'm taking care of. I mean, obviously work is an extreme example of that. It's happened in like life situations as well that weren't as stressful, but so just maybe a little guidance there.
Sure. Mark, you got something?
Yeah, well, it's Susan. Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is just like, I mean, wow, I feel you, and I really appreciate the way that you showed that to us. Like I could feel the energy of it, and it feels very powerful and very real to me. And my first question is just like, do you have a place where you can let that out in one form or another?
I do. I have a treadmill. And I find actually I haven't realized it, but I realize now that exercise has been kind of a therapy for me. Like I just can really get on there and cry if things have been bad or for years now. So yeah, definitely. I do have an outlet here to let it go.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, exercise is a great one. I really wish that more people kind of would learn about that because it's so beneficial in so many ways. So I'm really glad that you have that. Um, and the only other thing I really say is that like this is just so human, and this is like part of being alive, really, in my experience. And so it's as painful as it might be. I think sometimes you can actually sense like a truth there, like a beauty in this experience when it is allowed to come through, or even when it's not. And so my primary suggestion for you is to, if this awakening process is helpful to you, to continue to, find the resource there, but to also, in addition to the treadmill, almost everyone benefits tremendously from actually having another person that they can, let this out with, and let another person kind of receive your energy and acknowledge it. That in and of itself, even if that person doesn't really know what to say about it, someone who can just like hear you and not really reject you, I think it does wonders for the soul,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that sounds good. There is someone who like I call on my way home and say, "Hey, this happened to me. You just hear me. I don't need you to say anything about it." And they're good about that. So yeah, thank you
That's
for
great.
like helping me put that together.
For sure. That's great. And just if you feel like you need more, then find some way to get more of that. That's what I got for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think he covered the bases really. I like that you identify exercise as one outlet. Consider exploring others in addition, something that may be fun for you. Like I'm thinking of a movement modality or some kind of somatic modality. We did a retreat last week, and we do this period of time called intuitive movement, and it sounds like you're in the jungle at some point. If you were to just walk down, you'd think there are like psychotic people in my house, but there are people screaming and moaning and laughing and giggling and grunting and moving and all. And it's the kind of thing where like the first time you do it, it's almost impossible to not feel a little bit awkward, or whatever. But the more you do it, the more you're really, what you're doing is you're just giving your body permission to move how it wants. Your body's language is movement in some sense. But from a very young age, we've learned, nope, this is the wrong way to move. That's the right way. Too much play. Nope. Now you got to learn to be serious. Now you got to learn to work. Now you got to learn to memorize. Now you have to learn to sit still and stand still and listen all day long. And right, I'm a physician. I understand that. It's a big commitment to being the receiver of a lot of information and emotions and feelings that people are going through, and it's just a lot. And it requires us to have in some sense, a relatively narrow range of movement, right? Just throughout the day. It's fine. It's the way it is. It's the way most jobs are. At the same time, I think our bodies are actually thirsty to like play and be goofy and express anger even, and express, but when like when I'm going through this in a room with other people, and there's people, hitting the floor and tapping their body and moaning and screaming and cartwheeling, and yet everyone is completely in full acceptance of what everyone else is doing. It's really cool. It's very, very different than most environments you'll come into contact with anywhere. And so I found it to be very valuable, and every retreat we do, it just becomes more valuable. So consider something like that, like an intuitive movement with yourself. Lay down on the floor and move, stand up and move, get on your knees and move, see what, sometimes you prompt the body a little bit to try different things. And at some point you'll just start feeling like, oh my God, my body just wants to do this right now, or it wants to, it wants to go like this, or like, I want to move around, and let your body like just process it. It's very good at processing energy, but we've learned not to let it. I think as a society, it's a societal thing. Maybe primitive cultures are better at this, like dance, like the tribal dances and things. They're very good at releasing the energy and doing it collectively and things like that. So consider some things like that. And that's pretty much what I have to say.
That all sounds good. Thank you both.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing. Okay. We are down to Soren.
Hey, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Oh, perfect. Well, I know there's a question here, but right now to just describe what I'm sensing is that there's a lot of a nervous energy here, which is kind of weird in a sense because I know it has to do with this meeting and asking this question, but it's weird because I'm no stranger to being in front of people and talking. I've been in many teaching situations and even been in seminars and holding seminars in front of hundreds of people and with no nervousness at all. So this is kind of a bit weird, but I think it's this nervous energy I sense is somewhat connected to what I wanted to report and probably also ask about, because over the last few months or something, I've noticed that things have started to shift for me again, which is something that happens from time to time. It's like it comes in spurts, like it's happening, and then it kind of levels out, and then another shift's happening, and so on. And but lately, and it's well, it started a little bit before that, but especially the video with you, and I'm not sure I remember the name of the video. It was about the time deconstructing time, and it did something from Josh. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it did something for me because I wrote to you in the Q&A earlier this week that it kind of said whoosh in me, and something just, I don't know. I kind of lost the sense of time to a certain degree, and it became difficult for me to actually keep my time and not go overtime with the clients I have at work. So I have to keep checking the time. But what it also did for me was that it somehow changed the way that the visual sense of what I'm seeing. In that. What I'm seeing is movement, more movement. It's not so much movement in time, just movement that's happening right now, that's ever changing in a sense. And as I was listening to that video with Josh, later on in the video, you were also talking about consciousness, and then it really hit me, not just as a thought, but not as a thought, but experientially, that there is actually no self, that the self is just a thought. And when that hit me, things again changed. And a funny experience, if I can call it that, I had when I went to a train station. I was just waiting for the train, and using thoughts to describe what was happening, it was people moving around. But what I was seeing was just movement happening. There was no people in there. There was just movement happening. And it was not even like there was a boundary between the different objects, to use that name or a term. It was just like a picture or something that was where movement was happening in. But what I also started to notice was that beneath all of this, there is some kind of a layer where there is a voice that is trying to that is some kind where there's some kind of identification with. But it's I see it almost as a slippery eel, because it's starting to talk in a voice where it sounds like it understands what's happening. So it's actually speaking in the voice of what's unfolding for me, with as if it is the awakening. Yes, I am now seeing this movement. I was hearing this voice describing to me this, yes, you are just seeing movement. And it seemed to me like this is still remnants of some kind of an ego structure or a thought structure that has now learned that there's no fighting what is happening, however long it's taking. There's no fighting it. So now I'm trying to become it instead, then catch it that way. And I think my question, if there is a question, is more, how do I actually handle this voice? Because it seems very slippery. Does it make sense?
It does. Mark,
Yeah.
you got anything?
You go ahead, Angelo.
Okay. So, so what it sounds like you're describing to me, and I'm about 94.3% sure, is the realization of non-dual, certainly boundlessness, which means non-separation, and it also sounds somewhat like formlessness, which is no perception, no perceptual distance, no objects, and even the intimacy of it, and the movement you're describing and the way you're describing it. It's not being viewed from a certain perspective. It's just movement for its own sake, in a sense. That all sounds very clear to me. Then what you described is what the next sort of step, what I would say, is that very sneaky background, or maybe underlying, or maybe collating experience that still goes on. And that's what I would call the fundamental self-structure. It's so easy to overlook. It's very subtle, but it's also, because it's been there so long, it's so easy to overlook. And it is subtle. And yet the difference between when it seems like it's there and when it's clearly not there is like heaven and hell, in one way of speaking. It's worlds apart experientially or energetically. The fact that you're very aware of it is awesome. I mean, I'm not sure there's much more I can even emphasize for you to do at this point, because you can see how slippery this can be the moment you either try to lean in too much or try to lean out too much. Any addition of will in this space, in a way, accentuates that subtle sense of self, right? So it's like learning a very delicate dance with experience, where you're alert, you're honoring the experience, and you're vulnerable to it and open and all of it, but you're not trying to make it more or less of anything. And yet there is this curiosity, like, it doesn't have to be overtly asking, but it's something like, what is this? Yeah. What is that little film, or that little bit of veil left, or that little bit of influence that's slightly turning the lens of experience or perception in this way that makes it feel like something is owning the experience, something's trying to, and I think your realization at this point, it sort of feels clear enough that I don't think you're really in danger that it's going to completely take back over or something and become completely identified. And at the same time, you can see what it's trying to do. You see it, in a sense, it almost has a little bit of will to it. It's trying to be something, be somewhere, find a position, find a view. That's all it's trying to do. It's like trying to exist in a way, and just keep feeling into it and loving this process, even when it's really gritty, because I know it is at times, but still just love it, and that's my best advice. This will all take care of itself.
Yeah, I have definitely have that feeling. I'm not afraid that it will take over, not at all. I've learned a long time ago to trust my own intuition. That was actually part of my education. I work as a massage therapist and in psychotherapy as well. And my main education is here in Denmark called healing massage therapy, which is psychotherapy and body therapy. And part of that is learning to work with intuition. So I'm very in tune with intuition, and I can definitely see now that it's very much more clear. This very silent voice, it is one that I've noticed before. I remember I wrote an email to you a few years ago, I think, about doubt being creeping in when I was having some clients. But what I've also noticed that even though doubt creeps in and I have this inner voice telling me that, oh, you don't know how to handle this. This person comes with too much trauma. You don't know how to handle it. Who are you to even think that you can take this person in and help this person? Once the person is in front of me, it's like I'm not the one speaking. Words are just coming out, and I'm actually able to help that person despite my doubts. So it's like a different level just takes over. So whatever voice was there, I kind of recognize this as being that voice as well. Something else just takes over. So I'm not afraid of it at all. I know it's just eventually probably just disappear, but I know it's also trying to creep in with a little bit of doubt in me sometimes. So yeah.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to say before Mark says whatever he wants to say is, I just wanted to acknowledge your sincerity and your compassion. Like, as I was listening to you that whole time, I felt a lot of compassion for sure. And you know, you're doing what you're doing and giving everything to this whole process is very admirable in my book. So
thank you.
Yeah, Soren, it was really enjoyable to hear your story. And I wish we had more of that massage and therapy thing in the United States. It's kind of rare here, but yeah, I mean, really, I'm just going to echo what Angelo said, and I think you're already doing this, so I'm just going to like encourage it, which is to, yeah, just like bring a smile to that voice, you know, and just fully take it in. Don't worry about, you know, no need to worry about it. I don't think you are, but just to embrace it and really welcome that voice here, because it is also something that's just happening, right? Yeah.
Now it just occurred to me that I should actually do to myself what I often talk to the people I have in therapy when they come with emotional problems, is to view this voice as the little child in me. It's me as a little child that just needs some love and caring and hugging. That's usually my advice to a lot of my customers. So yeah, I should do that with this voice as well. Yeah, just love it. That's it. Yeah. Thank you.
thanks, Soren. Someone asked if I'm recording. Yes. Oh, and Vasilikos from Greece. Awesome. Enfield. Nice to see you. I don't know where Enfield is. Okay, let's move on to Janine.
Hi. I'm feeling the need for a little bit of encouragement. A couple of months ago, during an interview for an upcoming retreat at the Samadhi Center in Canada, I said, bring it on. And I suspected there would be some discomfort, but I didn't realize that all hell would be breaking loose. I'm doing, or I seem to be doing a lot as far as emotion release work, TRE, Qigong. I've been acquainted with this body in a way that I've never been before, so that's been very helpful. But the sheer volatility and intensity of life, emotion, thoughts, I get scared sometimes thinking that, man, if the psychiatrist of old had gotten hold of me now, I'd be in a hospital, I'd be medicated, more shock treatments. I really don't want any more part of that system anymore. And I will say that things move, they move quickly, they don't stay. So that's a happy thought. But my God, I didn't realize the level of discomfort. And there's not a lot of people in my my life, that understand what I think that I'm doing. I will say that the future is not really appealing to me anymore. I don't really have any ambition, goals, these types of things. But I'm not depressed. I still paint, I still write songs and sing, but it's like, it's very present. It's like, what's to do now? What's the next obvious thing? And so that's what I do. But sometimes I feel so lost. I'm not used to having no goals. And I feel like I can't wake myself up. I understand. So what's so lost, so lost. I feel that I've come to the end of doing practices, and yet I still practice. I don't know what else to do. So since I'm still in this self-referential reality, even though I feel that I've come to the end of practices, apparently I have not. I'm just lost. Maybe that's a good thing.
Mark, you have reflections or?
Yeah, Janine, I feel a lot of impact hearing what you're saying. Like it feels like so much and just like overwhelming, and I really understand that it was understandable that anyone would feel lost when they don't feel like they have like an anchor in their life. There's not a clear direction. It's just this, it sounds almost kind of chaotic. And that when I hear you say you still have practices, you still have painting, like I'm really, really glad to hear that. I think it's really healthy to have some, you know, activities that keep you kind of in the physical world, and here they can be kind of grounding. So yeah, I'm really glad to hear you have that. And I kind of hear you saying that you don't feel like you have many people or maybe any people that can kind of understand what you're going through right now. And I think that can add another layer of challenge to the situation, especially if you kind of, if your mind kind of goes there and tells stories about that. So I really hear you. And if you're open to it, I want to give you the opportunity to just see if what it's like to have shared that. Like, you know, you shared some intense feelings, and I wonder if you can feel that you've been heard in this group and accepted at some level.
Yes, I do. I do have my my mate understands, I believe, but not everyone to the level that people who are on this, whatever this is.
Yeah.
Thank you for hearing me. Yes, it does feel very nice to be heard. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you're amongst good people, you know, like this kind of challenging thing. I think a lot of people can relate to it. So in one way or another, you know, I certainly can. So I hope that's helpful to kind of like know that, but even bring there's this really great guy, Rick Hansen, and he talks about savoring these kinds of experiences. Like if you are feeling heard or seen with here or with your mate, like to take that in and really relish those feelings. As humans, we're sort of designed to pay more attention to what's not going well, because it's deep in our evolutionary history to survive, and we need to do that to survive. But you know, it sounds like you're surviving fine. Like there's not a lot of tigers in your living room, you know, about to eat you, right? So you have this privileged space to savor the good stuff. And what that can do is it can really fill your tank. You know, it can really help you even sink into that feeling. And over time, a lot of people will find success in kind of orienting there, right? So then even when you encounter these difficult experiences, there's this almost sort of like unconscious thing that tells you, I'm going to be okay. It's okay, you know? So that's what I got for you. Thank you for sharing. It's really beautiful.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I have a reflection on what you said, and that is like I truly get it. I get exactly what you're saying. Literally, directly. I've been through that in so many levels and in so many layers. I'd hazard a guess that almost everyone here can relate as well. And to the fact that even though you don't overtly feel like, oh, I need to go out and tell people about this and people I work with and stuff, it's not really about that. It's the way people physically move when there's mind identification going on is in a sense, it's sort of discordant with this movement. You feel like you're an outsider. You feel like you are you're going in the cave. You're going into the cave and you can't even know what's going to be in that cave, but it can be surprising what's in there, right? So I just want to acknowledge all of that. It's this process, like I said a week or two ago or whatever, it gets way bigger than any of us could imagine it will. It gets more subtle than we can imagine it will. It shows us things we didn't even know were there. And it's great that it does that. And yet when certain things drop out or go away, it can be unsettling. So when time goes away, and the sense of a future or using a mental idea of what I'm going to be doing next or what I'm looking forward to or what I'm interested in, even like using those to stabilize ourselves a little bit. When that drops out, it's like, oh, whoa, I don't even know how to stabilize myself. Like which way's up, which way's down. And as you mentioned, this doesn't stop when that happens. It doesn't stop for your comfort, right? It just keeps going and it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And so it actually has to do that. You have to be able to, at some point, let go of those tethers. Like they will be let go of. And that allows a deeper and more, let's say, granular experience into these pain body spaces, these difficult spaces. But it's so intelligent. It makes so much sense in and of itself, especially later on. Sometimes it takes a while in reflection. It's like, oh my God, it was so perfect, but painful and difficult. The last thing I'll say is there's a very lovely saying that you will learn to abide in the non-abiding. And the way I'll break that down here is, or the way it appears to me is, there's definitely an unbinding process that was always going, but there's often a very big unbinding that just can happen suddenly, where you don't have direction. You don't know which way is up and down. You can still function, you can still function, but something very viscerally is going, wait a minute, I have no orientation. I don't know which way I'm going. I don't know if I can apply effort, or if I should not. I don't even know what surrender is anymore. I don't even know, right? And yet this process just keeps going and going and going, and it takes everything in one sense. When we first cross into that non-abiding, it can be very disconcerting and disorienting. But I will tell you, over time, it changes. It shifts into this place where it becomes actually rather enjoyable to abide in non-abiding, because you don't have any responsibilities, in one way of speaking. You don't have to be someone anymore. You don't have to try to fix something about yourself, or, like there's a part of you that just knows that everything really, really, really is okay. But as long as we're trying to orient a certain way to structure a self, to control our environment, to make things okay, we can't see that fully. We're sort of distracted. So at some point, it really actually feels surprisingly good to just experience the world. This is that thing I'm kind of cautious saying, because it depends on the person and the situation I'm speaking to. It could be callous in a way, or it could be missing the mark, but it's also very true. And that is, there's just this clarity that doesn't care. It doesn't care how things go. It doesn't care if they go bad or good in our judgment. They go how they go. And there's a total release in that, a total freedom in that no matter how gritty it gets, how intense it gets, it doesn't actually matter. Because the clarity, or the self-knowing clarity in one sense, is all that matters. Like in Dzogchen, there's the term is, they have a lot of terms in Dzogchen, but one of them is empty clarity. It all comes down to empty clarity, which really resonates with me. And that's always there. It's there for you right now. It's there for you in the most difficult, confusing, disorienting times. And at some point, it's like you just fall into it in a very full way. And then these problems of, how do I orient? Do I orient? Do I orient to a future or a past? What's meaning and purpose about? What do I need? What do I not need? How do I manage this and that? These concerns really look pretty empty. Things get extremely light. And yet still there is a capacity to experience human textures, for sure. But they, as you mentioned, they do tend to dissipate much faster. They move through quicker, but they're very direct. It's very physical, very energetic and direct. So I think really you're oriented well. You're in a good place. Truly, it's just part of the deal.
I wanna thank you and everyone so much. I can feel your support. I will say that there is absolutely no turning back at this point. There's only through. And I am able to feel gratitude even amidst the shit, because I do have a very, like, everything's taken care of. I don't really, like, there is a lot of support, and so I'm very grateful. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this space.
Thank you. And, you know, it is grace when we have space to do this, when we have things taken care of such that we can take up this incredibly challenging, you know, whatever. And, you know, what ways can we distract ourselves? We can distract ourselves in millions of ways, but you're not. You're facing it head on. That's like, you have my admiration. That's all I can say. Yeah. Thank you.
I guess I'm up. Hello?
Hey,
Oh, sorry, I'm muted.
Okay.
I do that, like, I try to do some goofy thing like that at least once every recording.
Well, it's good. It's just adding to my disembodied current feeling. I can't even believe I put my hand up. I have no idea what I'm going to say. Yeah, this is, yeah.
I think that's perfect. I love it. Speak from nowhere.
Yeah, my heart is pounding. I thought I might talk about doubt, and then as I was listening to what was being said, I realized that I was actually listening to what was being said, and there was like this dual thing going on of wanting to think about what to say because I don't want to waste time, and realizing that was part of me that was being present to what was being said. I don't want this to be about doubt because it feels like, oh, that old chestnut. But it's so present so much of the time for me that I worry that it's getting in my way.
Can you unpack that? What do you mean by getting in your way?
I think it's like a belief that comes from a lot of the old kind of spiritual stuff from what feels like a past life now, and I just mean, you know, in the last couple of years, that kind of, that says like, if you don't believe in it, or if you don't have faith or trust, or, you know, if like that it won't happen, you know, that I'm somehow, that doubt is somehow going to be a big enough barrier that I can't get through it. And I really, sometimes I can just see that that's a thought, and it doesn't feel as present, but most of the time it just feels like it's this underlying current. And I'm really afraid that I won't wake up. And then even that fear feels like you know, an attachment that, you know, like I just get, I get up in my head.
How does it feel if I were to say to you, you can't force yourself to wake up, and you also equally can't stop it from happening at all?
It's like, yeah, it's definitely a real controlling tendency and it's not always here, but man, it is right now. And when you say that, it scares me, actually.
Good. Fear. That's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah.
There's usually an emotion underneath when we feel that sort of ambivalence. So there's fear. Let's just go into the fear. Just let it be here. Let your body feel it. Let it just come up through your body. We don't need to talk about it or manage it at all. Just let it be there.
It's hard not to go into thought.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And I just feel like I can feel the heat in my body. I can feel the tears. I can, you know, and that all feels okay.
While you're feeling that, just consider this question. Who is managing this? Where does that put your attention? Go as deep as that question can go.
It's like a place in my chest that becomes like a hole.
Is there any, just stay where you are, but is there any thought or even background thought defining your experience right now? Feels like it's holding a position.
The only thing I notice is just this this draw to go back up and figure it out, or it's almost feels like a fear that says you have to know this, you have to, you know, you have to.
What would it mean to not know this right now? What would it mean to not know? I'm pushing you. I hope you're okay with that. Okay. What would it mean to not know how this works right now at all? All of this. Who benefits or suffers from that? Just feel into these questions.
It's like the knowing is this little safe place here, and then there's just
And is that little safe place, that little tiny point in your experience, is that you? Look right at it. Feel into it.
It doesn't feel like it from a perspective because it feels like it's outside of me.
Yeah.
But I don't really know what me is except for sensation right now.
Yeah. Or the one, what about the one that's aware of sensation right now? The awareness of it, the experience of it.
That's not as clear.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I can intellectually go there, but I can't honestly go there.
That's okay. Yeah. You're in good territory. These little explorations are helpful. There's something, what I sense is there's something kind of holding on in consciousness as an identity structure. It's really trying to hold on. It's trying to find something to tether itself to. But even the perception of that is skewed somehow, a little bit. can't tell you how it's skewed because it's not that kind of a thing, but just consider that there's something primary to that, even something more simple, obvious, and direct right now than even the awareness of something trying to tether itself, trying to hold on, trying to either avoid something or grasp onto something. All those movements, in one way of speaking, are sort of observed, or maybe they're happening within something. A sense of self that goes beyond all of that, a sense of being aware that goes beyond all of those discrete movements. You explore that directly. Don't make conclusions.
Yeah.
It's even trickier in this space because it's a little easier to go to an intense body sensation and know when you're making conclusions and when you're not, because it's either full on direct or up here in the head. But when we're sort of in consciousness, trying to discern, like, where am I taking myself to be up here though? Who's the one that thinks it's attention's being directed back up here? Who's the one that feels like it's trying to hold on or not hold on? Is that fully me? Is that fully this experience of being? Or is it just a ripple within the experience of being? Just keep exploring that, however long it takes, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I think so. I think I don't, there's not a real concrete sense of a me or who am I, but I don't feel like there almost has ever been, but then I can do things with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's almost like I'm looking for a place that I'm already past or already, because I listen to things and I hear things and I put myself, kind of compare.
Yeah.
So
you may have had a shift in identity at some point in the past too. I've seen that before, where it's like so distant. Some people have a little bit overlooked it or just sort of forgotten about it.
And in other ways, if I feel so, like my thought world is, and the control and is just so like, yeah, it's very strong.
I mean, your explorations to me feel right on. I mean, they feel totally sincere, and that's what matters. You know what a thought is, you know what emotion is, you know what sensations are. You feel comfortable in this discomfort, which is good, and willing to explore. So you're going in a good direction, even if there's no specific insight shift right now. The work is obvious. You're feeling this full on. So that's pretty much what I have to say at the moment.
Here, like I feel like I get amazing insights, but they don't feel integrated.
Mm-hmm.
Best way I can put it. And I think there's a frustration with that. That makes me doubt then.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Why not? It feels like there's just something not connected.
Yeah. Okay, Mark may have some other stuff to say. There's a lot of material there.
I would just want to encourage you to stick with it, because I also think that this is going really, really well. And I would just encourage you to support your body and your environment and all the human things that you need. And that will support what you're doing. This really great work that you're doing.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your heart. I know I haven't interacted or seen you much, just a little bit in background of things. And you just feel like you're all heart. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. It's beautiful.
Thank you. And thank you, Angelo.
You're welcome. Okay. Now we are down to Mallory.
I can't hear Mallory.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hear you now.
I'm really nervous.
Let's take a moment to all be collectively nervous, because everybody has been. It happens for sure.
I just wrote something down to read, if you don't mind. Something short and simple.
Perfect.
I know this is a safe space, and I wanted to jump on as a form of exposure therapy, to be vulnerable. and face my fear of intimacy and being judged and perceived as incompetent. I'm trusting the process, and I don't have any questions. I would like to express my gratitude for you, Angelo, and the work you do. And thank you, Mark, for your heart and presence. And to everyone here, I feel so much love in my heart when I see you all.
That was beautiful, Mallory. How's the experiment going? How's your exposure therapy right now?
I feel alive.
Is there anything else that you want to do with your time in the spotlight here?
I don't think so.
Well, I appreciate you showing up. And I really love that you wrote something down and that you signed yourself up for some exposure here. That's awesome. Angela, did you have anything you want to say?
Yeah. First of all, I love how sweet you are. It just comes across. It's so endearing. It's so innocent. But I also love being that you're just surrendered to the experience of this. And boy, first time you do this, second, third, fourth, fifth time you get up and talk publicly about something this intimate, this personal, in a public setting, something like this, of course, it's going to be very intense. It can be, but you're doing just fine and you're coming across just fine. I also just want to say, this is just an instinct. I don't really know. I haven't interacted with you enough to know this, but I will say that I've made videos about this before a few times as well. Sometimes when I look at the way people approach awakening and just overall, I'm just kind of curious, like what seems to work, what seems to hinder people or get them caught up and things. One thing is clear: everybody wakes up their own way. That you just have to go through in that own. It's such a personal, gritty experience in so many ways. But there's something in you that knows how to do it for sure. But aside from that, when I compare people who are very like practice-based and rigid and very intellectual and things like that, they tend to unwind a little slower than people who just throw themselves on the fire of life. And you seem like I said, this is just an intuition. You seem like the kind of person who just throws themselves on the fire of life and this experience. And even though it's so vulnerable and like, I'm sure from a mental standpoint, it's kind of like, what am I doing? I don't even know what to say or ask. It's actually a really powerful movement to let yourself do this, because the whole kind of point of this awakening process is that it's beyond us. It doesn't care what we think it is. It doesn't care what we think it's not. It doesn't care what practices we think we can use to force it to happen. And again, I'm not against practices at all, but we have this sort of ego structure that will identify with everything, including practices. And there's just the way of acquiescence, the way of surrender. And that may be your way, and it works really well. So I love that you say you trust the process and you're willing to put yourself in a vulnerable position and speak even when you're not sure what to ask. That's music to my ears. I don't have a problem with that at all. So I wish you fruition.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Where are you from, by the way? I'm curious about your accent.
Mississippi.
Okay, love it. I was like, that's a heavy Southern accent. Wasn't sure, but that's cool. Okay. All right. Very cool. Try to stay cool down there. It's a challenge this time of year. All right. We are down to Lynn.
I have to speak now. I'm so sorry. I
Up to
thought I
you.
was going to show up on the screen. By the way, I know what you were interviewed for, what documentary, because I was in a class the other day and he talked about it and I talked about you. So
Cool.
That's going to be very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
It was a fun experience. I do my little YouTube channel recordings with my little camera and my little editing stuff, but those guys have a whole other level of equipment and setup, and they're so good at it, and they just make it look so good. It's really fun.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I had an experience of something I haven't had to feel for a very long time, and I think it's root stuff. Well, I don't think, I know it is. Most of my life, I've been inward facing, and spent a lot of time alone. And actually, since I got laid off from my corporate job 17 years ago, I started working for myself, working from home, and I'm pretty much a hermit. I mean, I go out and I show up well with other people and I'm open. But for the most part, it's because I have this safe place to return to. I went to join a Zoom call this week, and all of a sudden I went from this, I, I had, I was like I was hit in the face with 65 people on the screen in little boxes, but it might as well have been in the room with me, because there was an immediate contraction of fear, and and I saw the thoughts that created it, probably for the first time, and I saw that it was created to protect me. It was a self-protection mechanism, and that my mind was creating the separation. And I realized that I have a real fear of the I wasn't feeling the fear of non-separation in non-separation, but once I felt the fear and the emotions that go with it, I chose non-separation. I saw my mind judging the people, and then I saw that those thoughts of judgment were a way of protecting myself and separating myself. I have been in several cults, one in particular a long time ago, 40 years ago, for 16 years, and it was kind of brutal and also very beautiful. And I've been through 20 years of therapy, but there are things that I couldn't talk about to my therapist. I ended therapy 2 years ago, and I think I made the choice of separation, but at the same time, I immediately left that place of lightness and non-suffering, and I was like immediately back into psychological suffering of feeling alone and separate without the expansiveness that I know I am. And I love when I'm open and full and my true self. But I feel so much safer in the known suffering, but it's so painful. And so I spent an entire day crying. I could feel my heart ripping open a little more. And I think I've made the decision to let it go, but I had the thought that I'm caught in a loop because of previous difficult experiences in the cult related to openness and devotion and expansive love and disbursement. I'm not really particularly afraid of losing myself, but I'm afraid of what could happen to me if I'm that open. For example, the first time I came to the abyss was when I was living in the cult. And I said, oh no, I'm not going there here. I don't know what's going to happen after, and I could be hurt. And so I held back and shut down for 30 years. And I do know that I was pulled and that this isn't me controlling anything. But at the same time, some part of me is trying to maintain control again. And it got me. And Soren talked about the slipperiness. And I feel like I don't know which eye is speaking sometimes.
Mark, you got any reflections?
Yeah, listening to you, Lynn, it's so understandable that there is some process inside of you, whether you think of it as like a part of you or a voice inside of you that's saying, be careful. You got really hurt when you had similar experiences in the past. And yes, it's possible that right now that voice is also sort of discouraging you from this more awakened, open way of being that you really do want to happen. You want to live in that way. And so, yeah, that's a bit of a, you could say that's a disadvantage of that protective part. But I just want to express my gratitude to that part of you, because that version of you cares so much about the more vulnerable parts, So what's it like to hear me say that?
Actually, my whole body shook. So it wasn't a thought about it. It's the part of me that's been protecting me since childhood, actually.
Yeah.
Because I had to live separate, if not to be annihilated at that time. It's the part that's made me autonomous, actually, as I've grown up. And so I think I don't feel safe without it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does. Okay,
Yeah,
so I have tears. Thank you so much.
sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have too much to add, just because Mark was so direct in addressing what like the heart says about this. You're obviously very sincere, and actually always have been, and yet our conditioning, our preconceived notions, our ideas about things, and et cetera, really could be almost summarized as not fully trusting ourselves, can actually lead us into, paradoxically, situations where we're almost like inviting the situation to prove to us that we can't trust ourselves,
That's what I'm afraid of.
But I think you've matured out of that, to be honest. I think you've matured. Obviously you've done a lot of work, and you've learned the hard lessons. I've never been in a cult, and yet as I listened to you talking, I felt like I was living your life with you. I felt it's very familiar to me, actually. You are, in one sense, I think you're very, very spiritually clear and have always been. But there's a kind of a gap, pretty big gap between that deep truth that you've just always known, and probably more than most teachers you've come in contact with, probably more than the cult leader that you're in. And then this other side, though, it's that very human side of us that's very strongly influenced by conditioning, that just says, nope, don't trust that. Trust all this other stuff you learned. But all that learned stuff, it's just so laden with pitfalls and traps, depending on how we grew up and what our past experiences are. This isn't laden with pitfalls and traps. However, it requires everything. It requires a full-on letting go into it. I can't tell you when and how to do that, but I know you're going to do it, and I know you're doing it. And sometimes it's little by little, but I feel, I don't know you, so you just take that with a grain of salt, but I feel you're beyond the real worry about getting sucked into some charismatic teacher or leader or anything like that. I think you've done that work. That's my sense of it. I want to see, I'm kind of curious to see how this plays out for you. I'm really curious to see where you are in a year.
I heard you say there were possibly going to be 250 people at your retreat. And I said, okay, he's gotten too big now. I kind of panicked, actually. I can't imagine being, I need to start with, 30 or 40 people, I think.
Yeah. Are you going to it?
No.
Oh, okay.
Are you kidding?
Yeah. I'll tell you, it sounds like a lot. It's a lot, but it's a really powerful experience to be in a group that size and meditate. I've done it at Adyashanti's retreat with bigger numbers, where I'm just in the audience, and I loved it. It was so powerful. And it's a silent retreat, so it's not like you're influenced by others around you necessarily, but you do have that collective samadhi and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I may have smaller venues coming up. I've thought about it, maybe here and there doing some smaller venues as well, sprinkling them out maybe throughout the country and places that people can get to and stuff like that. There's a benefit to all of them. I do home retreats with like a very small number of people. Obviously, I can't invite very many people, but they also have a very different kind of flavor, which is very nice and intimate. So I don't necessarily have a preference, although I will say the bigger groups they're very powerful in the especially the seated meditation, just the power of it, because these are sincere people that come to these, and
That's true.
it's collectively quite powerful. But that's kind of an aside to what we're talking about. You don't necessarily need a retreat. You don't necessarily need a teacher or anything like that. They can be helpful, but it's really just about trusting your deep instinct, trusting it, but also trusting and knowing that it takes everything.
I think that I have to break through this, that somehow I'm the type that dives in, and so if I had the money, I might actually go to the retreat and see what happens. But
yeah. We also do online retreats, which are pretty powerful.
That's about what I'm comfortable with right now. I think I have 70 years of conditioning. So, I mean, I've also been working on it at the same time. So I guess it's not so cut and dried.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Nice to hear from you. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to Purna.
Hi, Angelo. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Awesome. Great. Well, I've been reading your book, and in fact, I came across your YouTube videos, and I introduced my wife. I know she was logged in earlier, so she's kind of ahead of me at this point. But I've been reading the book and digesting the material. So I have this question, which is maybe a little bit intellectual type, a little bit. The question that I have is, you talk about awakening and realization and everything else, right? The stages of awakening chapter that I was kind of reading the other day. So my understanding of awakening is that, and again, this is my interpretation based on my background and a lot of tradition that I've studied and everything else. So obviously it's biased opinion, so to speak, on my interpretation of the world, the way I see it, is that when you're awake, which means you are constantly aware of the consciousness that you have, that you already are, right? But you're living in the world and going through it, the process, but somewhere in the background, you have that awareness. But it's not, it's more than intellectual. You understand it, you know who you truly are, but at times you kind of, fall off the trail and go in a different direction, and you get angry and upset at the normal human behaviors that we have, right? And you become unconscious, so to speak, right? And then you come back and say, oh, that wasn't the right behavior. That wasn't the right way of doing things. And then you go back a little bit, but then you kind of, straddling between the two paths, so to speak, or trails, if you want to call that. So you have a deep understanding, you believe in it 100% or 200% that, I am this pure consciousness bliss, and not this body and the mind. And there's, all the details that you talk about. So you have this awareness, so to speak, which is where you want to live in, but it's not always there. So, but you definitely believe in it. You have deep understanding. Is that the awakening? And then the realization is that, like, you're constantly living in that space of continuous awareness. Obviously, given that we are in three-dimensional time and space, you kind of come in and out. So there are transition times, but in general, would you say awakening is the deep understanding and experiencing to a certain degree, but not being always there, and realization is the next step where you actually are, and you generally never get out of that? I wanted your thought. This is my understanding. Is that, how far along am I on that understanding?
Angelo, you're muted.
Thank you. I thought I'd just do that again just for fun. So it does sound, as you mentioned at the very beginning, it is a bit of an intellectual model that you're describing.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean it's not representative of the true insight, because it can be, just like what we read in the Upanishads, what we read in the suttas, and all of it. Those are also words, but many of them are very clear, pointing to a true insight that somebody had. Someone had that insight that is very obvious and undeniable. When I talk about awakening, the first awakening, I'm talking about the first direct contact with that undeniable insight. And I'm very careful to use which words I want to use with you, because you've got a structured idea here, which is fine. I would not call it knowledge or belief in the usual way of saying it. Like you said, 100 or 200% belief. That's great. And I feel like before awakening, I definitely had things that I felt that much belief around, but I probably didn't realize that on the other side of those beliefs was the root of a doubt. Belief and doubt are quite tied together. We can believe something very, very firmly, and then life shows us, well, that's not quite how it is. Sometimes in a really big way, sometimes in a small way. This is beyond belief. It's all I can say is it's direct. It's a direct knowing. And it's that simple. It's so obvious that there's nothing to think about anymore, really, about the insight itself. There's no doubt really about the insight. There can be doubt thoughts after that come later on and stuff. But the insight itself is so crystal clear and so obvious. There are a few other qualities that I often will say that stand out a little bit with this. And often it's remarkably not of the spiritual flavor we used to have in our mind about what we thought this was all about. Often that surprises people. Like, yeah, it's not non-spiritual, but it's also not that flavor of intellectual spirituality I had picked up as I grasped all these little tidbits in life of experiences and doctrine that I had read, and I collected all that. I had a flavor to it. This is like beyond flavor. It's like flavorless in the most miraculous way. So what I really go back to this a lot, because it's really what I think is true is awakening it's not a knowledge thing necessarily, but you could describe it as a knowledge. It's not an experience, but you could describe it as experiential. But you can have all kinds of knowledges and all kinds of experiences, very altering experiences, very mystical experiences. You can have all kinds of experiences without a shift in identity. It's a shift in identity. You feel like what you thought you were on one side, and what you're taking yourself to be on one side, and what feels like identity on the other side are very different. That's the best way I can describe it. When I say realization, I kind of mean the whole process. I mean like the whole from beginning to end sort of thing. If I were to talk about liberation, I mean something pretty specific. Well, right. I sometimes say it in two ways. One is liberation from the illusion of the self structure, let's say, the illusory self, the separate self, and all that. That's a more insight-based statement. But to make it a little more personal, paradoxically, it's actually liberation from suffering, from personal suffering, which aren't not always exactly the same thing. They don't come right at the same time necessarily, but they're very interrelated. But that's definitely an abiding experience, meaning it doesn't come and go. It's the insight and experience are seamless. So some of what you said very much resonates with what I just said too, but I just want to make those couple key distinctions about shift in identity is the key. Nisargadatta said it beautifully. It was like, you are not, his teacher told him, you are not what you take yourself to be. And that's about as clear a statement as I can give to the person, the mind, and the heart that wants to wake up. So that's my take on it. Okay. I may say something different at a different time. Mark may have something to say as well.
Yeah, I might, but I'm curious to get an initial reaction from Purna. Did you have any reaction to it?
Oh, No, I agree. I mean, what Angelo said is sounds pretty reasonable. I think, I just feel, well, I say I feel, I have less of a feeling, compared to lots of other folks who just spoke earlier, a very deep feeling. And I'm one of those, as Angelo identified, a more intellectual type, which is actually a negative in some ways, because it's a detriment, in the path, or a hurdle, I should say. So, which I recognize that, but it is, I'm made up of what I am right now. So I have to kind of understand that and kind of overcome that hurdle, so to speak. So in general, I would say, yeah, I think I recognize that. It's just that, there's a deep understanding or feeling, some feeling is there that I am wearing this virtual goggle. I'm speaking to you in a virtual world on a virtual screen, actually, which is the real. So that recognition, the feeling, I would say the word, not just understanding, is there. Not all the time, but many times. And so that's the good news. But I would like to extend that duration without going into the to me, the model that I understand, and even Angela, I think you could talk about it too, probably in different words, that being in that state of awareness, and I don't know what that is, but there's got to be some state of awareness which is always present all the time, at the substratum level, right, as the foundation of our existence. That's how do you get to that state? I mean, that to me, that would be blissful. Forget all the, everything else. And, I'm generally a very happy person. I have no complaints about life or anything. I don't have any issues per se, although my wife thinks that I have some things to clean up, but I won't go there. So generally speaking, I feel pretty happy about where I am. And then again, what I hear, there's no practice or anything like that, understanding, but there is a practice which is reading books like, Angela's books and other YouTube, system. And I do meditation. So I think I do have fairly good experiences also at some time.
Yeah. So the one thing I wanted to add when I was listening to you and Angelo was I was actually really curious about the feeling, right? Like, what is motivating you to explore this? And I got a little bit of that from what you were just saying. Like, I could feel it, I get that you're an intellectual person. I am too. I think Angelo, definitely has a really strong intellect. And I think his work appeals to a lot of different kind of people, but is almost especially a gift for mental people, right? So your intellect, it will be a detriment, but it's also an aid. And so I would, if you're open to it, I'd like to give you two pieces of homework.
Sure.
Okay. Part one is either start reading Angelo's book again, or when next time you pick it up, slow down. See if you can intentionally make space for what he's saying, rather than integrating what he's saying into what you already know. Because I think that, again, here's where your intellect can help you. You have the capacity for great clarity, okay? But in order to make use of that capacity, from what I'm seeing, I would suggest that you really make an effort to create a blank slate in your mind so that you can pick up on all the nuances of what Angelo is saying. And this is a pattern that I see in myself all the time. Like, if you're smart, you have a really sophisticated and high functioning worldview. So there's all the reason in the world to kind of keep it, right? But I think if you can let go of it, it'll help in this process. That's one piece of homework. Another piece of homework is to perhaps I'm not sure what kind of meditation you do, but I would suggest a meditation where you continually tune into that feeling that you were talking about. like maybe a feeling of awakening or a feeling of desire that you have to move forward in this process. Okay, so that's what I would have for you.
Well, thank you, Mark. A great suggestion. I appreciate that. So
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
great. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Perna. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, we have Kate.
Hello, Angelo. Hi,
Been
Mark.
too long, Kate. What? I don't think I saw you last month.
I know I keep missing them. Anyway, it doesn't line up with all kinds of stuff. But today I was in my car and I was like, oh my God, it's now. John sent me a message. I was like, shit. So I came home and so first I want to say that I am also feeling nervous. I also feel I'm feeling a lot of nervousness right now and emotion coming up. And this has been as of we've been going through the list of people, it's like, why does it feel this emotion coming up? And I also don't really know what I want to say. And I want to preface this also with, I think usually when I ask questions, I don't give myself a lot of space. I feel like I need to ask quickly and leave space for everybody else. And it's a challenge for me to like take this space, and it's a challenge for me to figure out like to come on here and I don't know what I want to ask really, but I kind of feel like I feel I'm just gonna talk for a while and meander a little bit if that's okay, and
You're
then
fine. Take up as
see
much
what
space
comes
as you
out.
want to. We have time.
Okay. I feel frustrated. I feel inadequate. I feel like I'm not making any progress. I feel like I don't have any insight. I feel like a lot of inadequacy, I guess, is what's here now. So much doubt. And like, despite, we had an exchange a couple weeks ago about emotion, and I had this like really clear experiential insight of an emotion coming up and going through. And it feels like it was grace that happened the day after we had that chat, because it hasn't come since. And I just feel like really stuck, and unable to, like, I don't know, one thing that's been kind of there for so long is like I can never stick to a practice. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't matter, like it just doesn't happen. I maybe for a few days and then whoop, something else, and it just feels like when emotional stuff happens or there's heaviness, then that becomes a thing. I don't know. I just feel kind of like all over the place, and sometimes I feel like I just don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I feel like there's more. Sorry, let me turn this off. There's. I guess I'm seeing certain things, like you pointed out, a couple patterns in my family, and that is continuing to undo. There's more stuff happening in my family that's just really making me see things differently, see my idea of family differently, and thereby also noticing how much of my identity is tied up with my family, like so much of it. So I think I just feel a little bit like I don't know what to do. I don't know how to go forward. I don't know, like, yeah. I don't know if there's something else there. There's probably more stuff there that I'm not, yeah.
What's it like to take up this space right now, Kate?
There's a little bit of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess like a feeling like I should be asking something clear. I should be, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Was that a familiar feeling?
I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah. When I was listening to you, I was relating a bit because in my life, kind of across the board, but especially when it comes to spiritual practice, I've not been really good at keeping a steady, form of it, right? Like I've definitely gone through, it sounds like you have too, gone through periods where I'll sit every morning for half an hour, but then that ends and then I'm on to some other thing. And um maybe it'd be better if we could, but it just sort of seems like that's not what's happening. So I was relating to you, but I was also feeling this sense that there was something that was consistent, that there was like I don't know if this resonates with you, but that there was a consistent desire or impulse like to keep going. Does that resonate? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always there. Like, I mean, I've told this to Angela in the past, like every day there's something like I'm thinking about either thinking about this or sitting to actually practice or trying to practice or having the intention to practice or listening to, so there's always something every day. And that's like very central to my life. Like it's really the main
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. I want to validate that.
Yeah.
That to be okay. I want you to, if you can, to allow that to be like good enough. I think some people they struggle to like sort of get on board, right?
Mm.
And like the inconsistency is like a detriment for them because they're never going deep. But it sounds like you know Angela Barrett. I don't know you that well, but I immediately have the sense like that's not your problem. That you're deep, you're in it, and I don't imagine you not being in it at any time. So I want to offer you the possibility to allow your practice to be one that morphs like day in and day out, and to trust that you're on the path and that you're working. Um, and that any kind of should that comes up, it should look like that, it should look like this. It's not necessary. It's really not necessary.
It's thank you. I mean, I hear you say that, and thank you. And then I still have this like, but I don't feel anything shifting. I don't feel like I'm having deeper insight. I don't feel like, I don't know, like it makes me feel like I'm a fraud or like I'm not, I don't know. It's like I'm pretending or like I'm fucking, I don't know, like it's just
Yeah, that's a strong thought pattern I'm hearing.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so that's something to work with. But for what it's worth, like I have faith. Like I know I'm very confident actually that you're moving even if it doesn't seem like it. So that's what I have for you. Take it or leave it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback off one thing Mark said, and that is the concern, specifically the concern about not doing consistent practices and all that. Like that doesn't bother me in the least, as far as I don't equate that to like a poor practitioner or something, or someone who's not going to wake up or any, it's nothing like that to me. It's just how it goes sometimes. And actually, sometimes you have to go through that, especially people who have had very regimented practices or been in a tradition like say Zen that has just regimented practice. Even though there's a huge benefit to it, your identity can get built around that. Like, and at some point that'll fall apart, and it can be really distressing to people who really identified as a hardcore practitioner when it's like they just can't do that anymore. They may do it sometimes, but it becomes intermittent, or so many people go through that stuff where it's like, I don't even know if I know what my practice is, and should I practice? Shouldn't I practice? The mere fact that you said every day this is central, that tells me everything, and that's what matters the most, in my opinion, as far as letting this whole process continue to sort of move deeper into itself. And then the last thing I want to say is, there's the part of what you're saying that is kind of like self-doubt or something, where it's like, I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if I've had a shift, or I don't know if a shift is coming. Am I sort of doing enough? And there's that part of yourself, or part of your experience. And then there's a part of yourself that I always sense when I interact with you that actually does not care about that. There's something very, actually, I'll say grounded, but it's even not really grounded. There's something very still there. I know it, and you know it. And I would say one thing you can investigate is ask yourself, like, what is the nature of each of those sides of my experience? There's a part of my experience that says, no, not enough, or maybe I didn't wake up enough, or I haven't woken up yet, or am I doing the right thing to cause it to happen? And then doubts that, well, wait a minute, that's control. So shouldn't I be surrendering? And I know those thoughts. The thoughts just go on and on. That's part of your experience. And then there's the part that's just like dead still. And you can kind of weigh those. You can ask questions. You can inquire. Which one's really, really real? Which one's really me? Which one do I resonate with the most? Or even which one developed and which one's just always been there? Because that part of us that doubts, that part of us that gets attached to thoughts and runs into our mind and disassociates, we learned that, or we learned how to use it from other people, from situations. But there's this other part of us that it's unlearned. It's there. And it's always just fine. And it's always right there, right on the mark. It's every part of your body. It's every part of your visual experience. It's every sound. It's so clear. It's always there. And, some of this process is about running to this side, then coming back to this, and back and forth, realizing you're not controlling the back and forth. You're not hitting the ping pong ball. It's just going. And so you kind of got to stay on the ride. Well, there's no getting off the ride now. You're on it, right? You know that. So, and that's perfectly okay. You're doing fine.
Yeah, I think that thing about, like, I just really feel like I'm not in control of it at all, like for sure. Like it, and that is shown to me very clearly when I sit and I say, okay, like I'm gonna sit and like inquire today, and it just can't. It's like, it's just not. And there's, I guess, like the frustration and resistance to that. It's like, well, but I should be doing that. Like that's what I should be doing.
But that's so brilliant, right? Because that's how the awakening process is. Like, there's a time for sustained practice, maybe, whatever. But there may be a time when, yeah, that's exactly what happens. I'm going to be a practitioner today. I'm going to sit and I'm going to do and then all of a sudden you're like, it turns into frustration because you can't do that. Well, the flavor of the day is frustration. That's what you need to see. That's what life is showing you. It just doesn't show it to us in the ways we expect it to. And it can be surprising, disorienting, confusing. And yet it's perfectly managed, perfectly choreographed.
Yeah, I feel like there was something that you were saying and I was just going to say something, but somebody dinged me and it confused me. Anyway, I guess, yeah. I think one of the most frustrating things is for people like you, or Josh, or Mark, or whoever to say, like, you're doing well. And I'm like, they're not seeing clearly. That's what it feels like. And I guess that's just the self-doubt.
Yeah, the you that's monitoring its experience, that's not doing well or not doing well. It doesn't matter. It's a collection of thoughts. And it never feels comfortable. That's not really what I'm talking, to be honest, that's not what I'm talking to. I'm talking to the whole movement. Like the whole feel of the movement of you, of all of that's going on. It's set up just right. It really does feel like that. I wouldn't say unless I meant it. And you know that. Yeah.
And maybe last question about thoughts, because sometimes when I'm practicing, there's like, it just feels like it just feels like being, and we had this discussion about unbound consciousness the other day too, like, but it just like feels like I get stuck in this loop of thoughts and it's impossible to take the step back somehow. And that's another thing that makes me doubt, right? Because like, well, if I can't sit in unbound consciousness, then like obviously I'm not like whatever.
That thought is unbound consciousness, like in the moment of meditation. The thought that's like, I can't even stay in unbound consciousness, like that's the eddy in the pool. You're the whole pool. So the whole consciousness thing, I think it just takes some time to really mature, but you just over time, you more and more and more see that, Doesn't matter what the swirls and eddies are, whether the wave starts here and ends there, or starts there and ends there, or how big the wave is, or how, how much you're focused on the wave, because you're already focused on everything all the time, because you are the entirety of the experience, not you as a separate intellectual you, but you as the knowingness of it all. So even that's okay when those doubt thoughts come. It's really maybe about a focus. Is it narrow focus on one thought, or is it like a broad focus on the entirety of consciousness, and then it's still allowing one thought to arise and be completely obvious, but you're not dilating, or you're not contracting attention back down right onto that one,
Right. Okay.
Something like that. Mark had something to say. I think I interrupted him.
Oh yeah, just a quick little tag on is something you might think about trying, Kate, is when you hear like this very clear voice saying, don't have the insight, or like you're not practicing enough, it sounds like it's kind of like this critical thing. If you can find a way, and it might not happen all the time, but if you find just enough space to kind of make a joke, I think that might help a little bit, just to kind of be like, some people even will name this other voice and say like okay, Cindy, whatever, but like some kind of way to just break it a little bit.
Okay.
If it works, give it a shot.
Okay, thank you. It's a good suggestion. Thank you both.
Thanks, Kate. Nice to see you.
You too.
So there's a comment I just had to read because it's great. It says, Angelo, thank you for the gift that is Mark. I can't take credit for Mark. Mark has to take credit for Mark. He's he's the markiness of the Mark that's here. So not Angelo.
Oh, Mark can't take credit for Mark either, Angelo. Come on now.
So you're appreciated. And I agree. It's a very nice energy in the space here for sure.
Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. Okay, we got about 20 minutes left, 15 maybe. Okay, Arnaud.
Hello, hello, Angelo. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Nice to talk to you again. I have a small questions for the past few months since we last we have talked. My day-to-day experience has shifted a lot. I have just have a month-long grief period that ended recently, and with lots of shifts, but no definitive one. I mean, lots of experience during the day. And my question is, I have the feeling now that my mind has a story which is constantly running in circle, and my intuition says that I should not listen to it, but I would like to have your opinion on it. So what I am experiencing for the past few months has been what I would describe as a kind of half-baked, unbound consciousness feeling. It's the intensity is fluctuating, so I am more or less diffuse or not. But for the past few weeks, after this big series of grief episodes, there is something else now which is coming and going, and it's more like some light non-duality experience, where not only everything is me, but the center is starting to not be there anymore, to be diffused in the room. And if I put my attention on it, I can feel myself travel as a cloud of sensation, which is not completely integrated into a self. But what is bothering me is that I certainly feel that I still have a door inside. I don't feel that I have gone through the first shift yet, where what my mind is saying is, since you are not in the witness state 24/7, which is kind of what you should attain first, there is no way you should have those environment shifting, and until you have that, those things will shift constantly and will never stabilize. And that was what my mind was saying. For the past few days, I have the intuition that, yeah, but I should not listen to this story and let things happen. But I am not sure exactly what I should do between visual self-inquiry, I am self-inquiry, just trying to rest in it. I'm a little bit confused because from what I have read, and I know that I should be very careful with in theory what should happen, but it doesn't fit exactly with what I would have been expecting, this mix of different level of experience intermixing during the same day. I mean, so basically, that's my question.
Mark, you want to start or want me to?
Go ahead, Angelo.
So I have a pretty concise answer for you, I think. And that is, I would not worry in the least about a witness state at all, or certainly 24/7. I personally don't really resonate too much with the idea of a witness. I'm not sure I had that experience myself at all. not in the way, I mean, I don't really know what people always mean when they say things. So, but that's not something I would necessarily give you as a litmus test for your experience or anything. And more so because this part of your experience is opening up so much, this beautiful clarity you described in this like fluctuating consciousness experience, which does feel expansive. And then even this sort of non-dual, it's like this all starting to feel like that is where I want you to go. What I mean by go is that's your practice. Your practice is showing you it. It's showing itself to you. Sometimes we pick a practice. Sometimes we try different things until something clicks. There's a lot of ways to go about this, but sometimes it comes right to us. And when it comes to you and you feel like you're really resonating with how to just vibe with that, like you seem to, I would say that's what I would do. It's not going to be there 24/7. You're not going to be able to find it all the time in total clarity, but you'll probably notice it's kind of always there. And sometimes it's very easy to just let it sort of take you deeper into it. That's all I would tell you to do. I wouldn't worry about self-inquiry unless some part of you is going, oh, I really got to do this self-inquiry, or it feels juicy somehow. But that's not what it sounds like. So I'm saying trust that life sometimes shows you exactly how to wake up. Really don't worry too much about the way other people describe it, because even the best descriptions are not a direct experience. They're off.
Thank you. And what drives that question is that sometime during the day I have those small period of time where I involuntarily enter the witness state. It becomes immediately extremely obvious. It lasts for a little time, then it stops. And I was thinking, okay, maybe my first goal is to stabilize that first, like kind of. But okay, so it's.
I wouldn't recommend that, honestly. Okay. It'll cause struggle, I think.
I think it has been, actually. Yeah.
And when it comes, great. When it's not there, it's fine too. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Nice to see you.
Yeah, I just wanted to make just a little side comment, because I wholeheartedly support what Angelo said. Like, it sounds amazing to me. It sounds like a great place to be. Exciting because it's fresh and new, right?
Scary sometimes.
Scary. Yeah. Well, I'm excited for you. But just to point out that, like sometimes like any kind of thing that we think we know about how things are supposed to be can get in our way, right? But when it's a spiritual teaching, I think it can be all the more insidious. It can be harder to drop it, because a lot of times we've heard these things with a great deal of authority behind them. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that when you hear something about like, you have to be in the witness state, like you're like, whoa, like it's intimidating almost. And so just to kind of say like, yeah, I don't think that's true, but it's understandable that it kind of persists a little bit, right? But yeah, other than that, just yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, let's go to Kieran.
Hello, Angelo.
Hello. Did I say your name right?
Yeah, because I think you always say Kieran or Kieran. Yeah, Kieran's good.
Perfect. I'll remember.
Hi, Mark. Yeah, you better. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Kieran.
Lovely. Well, I'm just checking in. In my day, I start after breakfast. I always watch one of your videos, Angelo, the ones with the great backgrounds. I just love those. It just I'm hooked on them. And then I kind of do like a couple of minutes afterwards. I do a couple of minutes of self-inquiry. And what I want to check in when I do the self-inquiry, obviously I go into a little space and stay in that space, which is fine. It's lovely. And what I'm checking in now is sometimes there's like a little pushing. I'm almost like pushing to almost get more in that space. And what my concern is that a subtle kind of identity happening there that, I'm kind of not sure about. So it's enjoyable. I love the space. And then when there's that pushing, I'm sort of a little bit doubtful. Should I just encourage that pushing? Or is that a sort of, some identity coming in to sort of, have some kind of control or have some kind of say in the matter? So that's really what I'm kind of checking into. I mean, that morning practice I just love. I sometimes can't wait to get out of bed to have my breakfast. Those backgrounds, Angelo, please never stop doing them. Yeah, so that's really, I'm just checking in to see, am I kind of, is that a subtle little identity sliding in there?
A great question. Mark, did you want to say anything before I say something?
Yeah, I said a little thing, so and then maybe we can hand it off to you. But I guess my initial take was just to ask you, Kieran, like if you take just a second right now and take a breath, and then what does your intuition tell you about that push? What does it feel like? What does it seem like? It's some sort of identity trying to direct things, or does it feel like a impulse to follow? What's your take on it?
The sense I have when there's a little encouragement, it's like almost Kieran is kind of reduced in some way. It's like then it's just what you're seeing, just the sense of the visions and the colors of what's in front of you, and it's like a little more intimate. So I kind of feel, it's I don't think that guy is sliding in, that little slippery eel is, I don't think he's, doing his thing. But I just want to check in because I know that slippery eel is so slippery. So it's like, you just turn around and there he is. So that's my sense.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that intuition to check it out. I like that. What do you got, Angelo?
I think actually you asking that question was very helpful. I hadn't thought of doing that, but that makes sense. And I would say just consider the possibility that there's just a sort of thought that's responding to a sensation somewhere. And the thought is interpreting it as, oh, I may be pushing here, but maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's just a sensation. Maybe because a lot of times when we start to self-inquire, we start to inquire, turn inward, something tenses up a little bit somewhere in consciousness or even in the body, in the face or jaw. And, the mind could easily interpret that as, oh, I'm pushing, or I'm pushing too hard, or there's some identity or whatever. That may just be an interpretation of just a very, very simple sensation. You could ask a question like, what is this like without even that concern, right? Without the concern that it could be pushing. Like maybe I could just let that concern go right for this moment, see if it just opens up a little more. The other thing you can do that may be valuable is as you're undergoing this process or this experience, just remind yourself every once in a while to just kind of like relax the body, the jaw, because sometimes we do tend to kind of really twist up our jaw, or we're clenching, our eyes are trying to focus to a really close distance, and we can get a lot of tension just doing that with our muscles and so forth. So sometimes just relaxing a little bit, just reminding yourself like I can inquire just as just as sincerely from a much more, or not much more, from a relaxed space as I can from a body tense space. And sometimes just relaxing a little bit, all of a sudden that sense of tension is not really there, and it just opens the space a bit more. But overall, I think you're in a pretty good place. I certainly wouldn't overinterpret it as identity sneaking in and things like that, because really we're just investigating the space and direct experience itself. We don't need to make conclusions. And I think your instinct about it when Mark asked was, you're in a good space with it, and you are enjoying this. That's obvious. You're enjoying it. It feels natural. Just let it pull you deeper into spontaneity.
Okay. Thank you guys. In fact, just as you're speaking, and you suggested, don't kind of get involved too much, whether it's this or that, and just as you move away from that assessment, there was more a melting, more where it's just taking you, it's saying, come, it's all right, no problem.
Very much so. Very much so. Beautiful.
Lovely. Thank you, guys. I just love this space. Thank you so much. Stay blessed, Angelo, Mark. Thank you for your bits, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Kate.
There you are. Thank you for it's lovely, gentle quality you got about you. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks,
Take
Karen.
care, guys.
All right, Peter. Probably last question.
All right. Hi, Angelo and Mark. I really resonated with, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Really resonated with Kate's question. I feel some of her frustration. I've read your book a couple of times, and now I'm going through the audio book, trying to get through it a little more carefully with a little more attention. And, your book and the videos constantly speak about how easy these practices are and how close we are all the time at any moment. And yet when going deeper into practice, such as inquiry, you describe all the hurdles to watch for and how certain attitudes must be held and all these pitfalls. And if practice isn't done exactly right, you may never make any progress. Sometimes this is so frustrating to me, in spite of my commitment and my desire to make this work. It's almost like I feel like giving up sometimes.
Have you tried giving up?
Have I tried giving up? I've tried turning my back on it for a day or two at a time.
There might be an even deeper way to give up. Just throwing that out there. But I also want to say one thing.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I never said if you don't get the practices just right, this may never happen for you.
May not have used those words.
Because that's not how I wouldn't put it that way.
What I received.
I totally get what you mean. It's very difficult to talk about this subject in a balanced way. It just is. It's really difficult because, if I don't ever talk about awakening as an event or anything like that, then I'm just sort of describing my own experience, and then people can look at that, go, well, good for you. So if I talk about it as an event, it does have side effects. It sounds like a big process. It can lead to feeling left out, competitiveness. It can lead to mental seeking in time. So I try to undermine all those processes as well. And that's kind of how I talk about the pitfalls, but there's just no perfect way to talk about this. I do appreciate that feedback though. I would say for you, just based on what I've interacted with before and this question specifically, is very much like what Mark said to someone a few callers ago. Really slow down with this stuff. Like, man, my book has so much stuff in it, but you don't need all of it. Find the gap between the words or sentences that works for you. Wherever that is, find that place that just starts dropping you past the intellect, past the doubt, It might be in my book, it might be in one video somewhere, it might be in a sutta, but you look for those breadcrumbs, and don't overcomplicate this stuff, because yeah, it's a big book and there's a lot in it. The pitfall kind of that thing is the kind of thing where once you've read that, it should sort of digest it within you. You don't need to keep thinking about it and worrying like, oh no, is this a pitfall? Oh my gosh, is it? When you're practicing, practice with ease. Don't practice with the mind. Don't try to recall my book. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Perhaps just more like natural meditation is what I would suggest. Read the chapter on natural meditation or just a little section and then sit. And sit with no agendas at all. No agendas. If a doubt thought comes, that's one doubt thought. Just notice it. That's all.
But when you're doing inquiry, the mind will immediately come up with an intellectual answer, and it's sometimes a struggle to figure out which of those answers are deep intuition or just the mind making an answer, filling the gap.
Okay, the thought that arises that says, I don't know if this is deep intuition or an intellectual thing, that itself is the thought that you're identifying with. You don't have to figure that out. In the direct experience of self-inquiry or even deep meditation, you don't have to figure out whether an experience is right or wrong. The thought that says you do, can be the barrier if you believe it. And you believe it by not noticing it's a thought. But that one thought itself, it doesn't have any truth value. It's not proving enlightenment. It's not disproving enlightenment. It's not moving you closer or farther away. So there's something that still wants to believe thoughts or wants to have a relationship with thought somehow because it feels predictable, safe. Oh, if I understand something, I get it, right? But this isn't the kind of thing you get through understanding. This is the kind of thing you get through penetrating the identity that feels like it understands. However you can do that. So again, for you, I'm thinking simplicity. Do something simple. Find a very simple approach that opens. When you said every time you do self-inquiry, or that when you do self-inquiry, it immediately leads to a thought answer or to thinking, I want you to challenge that in your own experience. I want you to practice asking a question in the way you formulated it from my book or whatever, an important question to you. Ask that question and see if you don't notice a gap between asking the question and letting go and when the mind starts grabbing a hold of that, okay? I don't care if the mind starts revving up, but I want you to notice there's a gap there. I want you to challenge the belief that when you ask a question, you have to think about the answer. That's one of the big sort of quote unquote pitfalls of self-inquiry, is we're just totally conditioned to believe when I ask a question, I need to start thinking about the answer. This is not that kind of a question. That's all I've got for you at the moment.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
I'll work on that. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Peter, I had something for you if you're interested.
Oh.
So this is like a kind of a guess on my part, okay? I want to fully support what Angelo said, and I really, really want you to do exactly what he was saying, because I think that's going to be key. And if there's a moment when you want to do something a little bit more sort of focused, right, rather than open, what I would suggest is that it's possible, and again, I said this is a guess, that part of what's maybe not happening for you when you're trying to just surrender into the moment, sometimes we have like these emotional barriers that kind of protect us from feeling them, right? And if you make a move like what Angela is suggesting, that can be wonderful, but it can also land you somewhere you don't want to be, okay? And so in addition to doing those kind of practices, if it feels right, and at other times, another kind of practice you could do would be more of like almost like an emotional inquiry. And if I were you, I would start with, why do I want to do this? Or what am I looking for? What am I seeking? Why is this important to me? Something like that. And see if you keep keep asking, and even when you have an answer, that's not the point. Just ask again and again and again, and see if something kind of moves there. And then when you go back to, that might open up a whole process, and then you go back to the more sort of natural meditation and see if there's anything different happening there for you.
Okay, that sounds like a good approach.
Cool.
Thanks so much, Peter.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thanks, Mark. It's been awesome. You killed it. People here were loving you, and got plenty of comments saying that. So appreciate you being here. And I agree that your heart is what is foremost in your expression. And it's been really lovely to see how everyone interacts with you.
Thanks, Angela. I'm taking that in, and really so grateful that you do this too, and all the work that you do, and really just so grateful that we have how many, like 50 some people here we are all in this together, and it's not like you can do this thing by yourself in a vacuum, or that you and I do this together and we're doing it. It's like, it's all of us, and it's just so amazing. So I have so much gratitude just for all of us together. So thank you all for showing up.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you all for your support ongoing. Keep an eye on the community tab for upcoming announcements of other non-dual and other lives and any other announcements. So thank you so much. I appreciate it, everybody.